Dynamic versus condenser microphones. What's the difference? The difference comes down to how they work. The diaphragm of a dynamic microphone is attached to a tiny copper coil that's wrapped around a magnet. The sound pressure of your voice causes the diaphragm and that coil to move against that magnet and create a tiny voltage that is an electronic representation of that sound wave of your voice. Compare that to a condenser microphone that's two tiny metal membranes with a tiny space between them that have an electric charge on them. That's what phantom power 48 volts is for, to power those two tiny plates. And when you speak into a condenser microphone, it moves one of the plates against the other one, changing the voltage between them. And again, that voltage is an electronic representation of the sound wave of your voice. Each of these types of microphones has trade-offs. The condenser microphone is a lot more efficient, so it actually picks up a broader spectrum. It has crisper highs, especially on the human voice. That efficiency also allows condenser microphones to provide more signal, so you don't have to turn your preamp gain up quite as much. Because they're so sensitive, though, that means they pick up everything around you. So if you're using a condenser microphone, you need to make sure you're in a space that is acoustically treated so you don't pick up any noise or room reverberations, because it will pick up everything around you. Dynamic microphones do not require power, and they tend to pick up only what is immediately in front of it, because they're not quite as sensitive as a condenser microphone. So you may be able to get away with using a dynamic microphone in a room that may not have as much acoustic treatment. On the negative side, condenser microphones, because they are so sensitive, are very susceptible to plosives, so you have to be really careful how close you are to the microphone, because you can easily overload it. You probably also need to use a heavy-duty windscreen or pop filter with it. That's not to say that dynamic microphones are not susceptible to plosives. They definitely are. They just tend to be a little bit more forgiving, and dynamic microphones are typically designed to be used closer to your face. Because of the way dynamic microphones also pick up things that are only really close to it, proximity effect tends to be more pronounced. And what that means is if you get further away from the microphone, it's going to start to sound really thin. If you get really close to the microphone, it's going to sound really warm. And again, condenser microphones do have proximity effect as well. It's not usually quite as pronounced as with dynamic microphones. So is a condenser mic or dynamic mic better for your podcast? If you're recording in a space that doesn't have a lot of acoustic panels and might be a little noisy, then the dynamic microphone is probably your best bet.